Section 54 of Armadale. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Armadale by Wilkie Collins. Book the Fourth, Chapter 3. The Diary Broken Off. London, November 19th. I am alone again in the great city. Alone, for the first time since our marriage. Nearly a week since I started on my homeward journey, leaving Midwinter behind me at Turin. The days have been so full of events since the month began, and I have been so harassed, in mind and body both, for the greater part of the time, that my diary has been wretchedly neglected. A few notes, written in such hurry and confusion that I can hardly understand them myself, are all that I possess to remind me of what has happened since the night when Armadale's yacht left Naples. Let me try if I can set this right without more loss or time. Let me try if I can recall the circumstances, in their order, as they have followed each other from the beginning of the month. On the 3rd of November, being then still at Naples, Midwinter received a hurried letter from Armadale, date Messina. The weather, he said, has been lovely, and the yacht has made one of the quickest passages on record. The crew were rather a rough set to look at, but Captain Manuel and his English mate, the latter described as the best of good fellows, managed them admirably. After this prosperous beginning, Armadale had arranged, as a matter of course, to prolong the cruise, and at the sailing master's suggestion he had decided to visit some of the ports in the Adriatic, which the captain had described as full of character and well worth seeing. A postscript followed, explaining that Armadale had written in a hurry to catch the steamer to Naples, and that he had opened his letter again, before sending it off, to add something that he had forgotten. On the day before the yacht sailed, he had been at the banker's to get a few hundreds in gold, and he believed he had left his cigar-case there. It was an old friend of his, and he begged that Midwinter would oblige him by endeavoring to recover it, and keeping it for him till they met again. That was the substance of the letter. I thought it over carefully when Midwinter had left me alone again, after reading it. My idea was then, and is still, that Manuel had not persuaded Armadale to cruise in a sea like the Adriatic, so much less frequented by ships than the Mediterranean, for nothing. The terms, too, in which the trifling loss of the cigar-case was mentioned struck me as being equally suggestive of what was coming. I concluded that Armadale's circular notes had not been transformed into those few hundreds in gold through any forethought or business knowledge of his own. Manuel's influence, I suspected, had been exerted in this matter also, and once more not without reason. At intervals through the wakeful night these considerations came back again and again to me, and time after time they poked obstinately, so far as my next movements were concerned, in one and the same way, the way back to England. How to get there, and especially how to get there unaccompanied by Midwinter, was more than I had wit enough to discover that night. I tried and tried to meet the difficulty, and fell asleep exhausted toward the morning without having met it. Some hours later, as soon as I was dressed, Midwinter came in, with news received by that morning's post from his employers in London. The proprietors of the newspaper had received from the editor so favorable a report of his correspondence from Naples that they had determined on advancing him to a place of greater responsibility and greater emolument at Turin. His instructions were enclosed in the letter, and he was requested to lose no time in leaving Naples for his new post. On hearing this, I relieved his mind, before he could put the question, of all anxiety about my willingness to remove. Turin had the great attraction, in my eyes, of being on the road to England. I assured him at once that I was ready to travel as soon as he pleased. He thanked me for suiting myself to his plans, with more of his old gentleness and kindness than I had seen in him for some time past. The good news from Armadale on the previous day seemed to have roused him a little from the dull despair in which he had been sunk since the sailing of the yacht. And now the prospect of advancement in his profession, and, more than that, the prospect of leaving the fatal place in which the third vision of the dream had come true, had, as he owned himself, additionally cheered and relieved him. He asked, before he went away to make the arrangements for our journey, whether I expected to hear from any of my family in England, and whether he should give instructions for the forwarding of my letters along with his own to the poste restante at Turin. I instantly thanked him, and accepted the offer. His proposal had suggested to me, the moment he made it, that my fictitious family circumstances might be turned to good account once more as a reason for unexpectedly summoning me from Italy to England. On the 9th of the month we were installed at Turin. On the 13th, Midwinter, being then very busy, asked if I would save him a loss of time by applying for any letters which might have followed us from Naples. I had been waiting for the opportunity he now offered me, and I determined to snatch at it without allowing myself time to hesitate. There were no letters at the poste restante for either of us, but when he put the question on my return, I told him that there had been a letter for me, with alarming news from home. My mother was dangerously ill, and I was entreated to lose no time in hurrying back to England to see her. It seems quite unaccountable, now that I am away from him, but it is none the less true that I could not, even yet, tell him a downright premeditated falsehood without a sense of shrinking and shame, which other people would think, and which I think myself, utterly inconsistent with such a character as mine. Inconsistent or not, I felt it. And what is stranger, perhaps I ought to say madder, still, if he had persisted in his first resolution to accompany me himself to England, rather than allow me to travel alone, I firmly believe I should have turned my back on temptation for the second time, and have lulled myself to rest once more in the old dream of living out my life, happy and harmless, in my husband's love. Am I deceiving myself in this? It doesn't matter. I dare say I am. Never mind what might have happened. What did happen is the only thing of any importance now. It ended in Midwinter's letting me persuade him that I was old enough to take care of myself on the journey to England, and that he owed it to the newspaper people, who had trusted their interests in his hands, not to leave Turin just as he was established there. He didn't suffer at taking leave of me as he suffered when he saw the last of his friend. I saw that, and set down the anxiety he expressed that I should write to him at its proper value. I've quite got over my weakness for him at last. No man who really loved me would have put what he owed to a peck of newspaper people before what he owed to his wife. I hate him for letting me convince him. I believe he was glad to get rid of me. I believe he has seen some woman whom he likes at Turin. Well, let him follow his new fancy, if he pleases. I shall be the widow of Mr. Armadale of Thorpe Ambrose before long, and what will his likes or dislikes matter to me then? The events on the journey were not worth mentioning, and my arrival in London stands recorded already at the top of the new page. As for to-day, the one thing of any importance that I have done since I got the cheap and quiet hotel at which I am now staying has been to send for the landlord and ask him to help me to a sight of the back numbers of the Times newspaper. He has politely offered to accompany me himself to-morrow morning to some place in the city where all the papers are kept, as he calls it, in file. Till to-morrow, then, I must control my impatience for news of Armadale as well as I can. And so, good night to the pretty reflection of myself that appears in these pages. November 20th. Not a word of news yet, either in the obituary column or in any other part of the paper. I looked carefully through each number in succession, dating from the day when Armadale's letter was written at Messina to this present 20th of the month, and I am certain, whatever may have happened, that nothing is known in England as yet. Patience! The newspaper is to meet me at the breakfast table every morning till further notice, and any day now may show me what I most want to see. November 21st. No news again. I wrote to Midwinter to-day, to keep up appearances. When the letter was done, I fell into wretchedly low spirits. I can't imagine why, and felt such a longing for a little company that, in despair of knowing where else to go, I actually went to Pimlico, on the chance that Mother Oldershaw might have returned to her old quarters. There were changes since I had seen the place during my former stay in London. Dr.